Mike with the Volkswagen Bus and Bug. So today I'm doing the top mistakes and things learning if you want to do a do-it-yourself restoration like I did, either of one of these old Beetles or an old bus like this. These are both German 66 and 61, and I just am a regular non-auto professional who just wanted to restore them. And basically for somebody like me, and if you're not like a professional and you don't have a lot of experience with this, like there's a lot of pitfalls and ways that you can just cause yourself pain, which I did, and I thought I'd share the top things that I learned, numbers 11 through 15. So this is the list. Number 11. Basically, when the body is super rusty, the heater channels are bad and it's completely rusted through, and you have to replace them. And so, you know, you put the body up on stands like this rolly stand right here, and then you have to cut out the old heater channels. Now, the thing is all the support is gone once you cut that out at the bottom, and so you really got to get these. I tried to first weld in just rails, and I literally welded them in and tried to keep that from flexing. But my number one recommendation if you're doing heater channels is buy a set of these. And there's a set for new and old body style basically, and you just want to put this in. It goes something like this, and that keeps your body from flexing at all when you're cutting out the heater channels and replacing them. And you just bolt this in nice and solidly. These things are like $150, but you can probably get some used ones from somebody for cheaper. You know, in doing the heater channels, you know, you're cutting out a very important structural part of the car, and so until you get it all welded back in place, what you might do if you let it flex is you mess up your gap. So that's the gap all along here will not be correct if you don't brace this correctly. So anyway, that's number 11. Number 12, no aluminum pulleys ever. So I'm 2 for 2 for an aluminum pulley that looks all fancy with the numbers in here. Just it messes up here because it's not as hard, and it can wind up messing up your whole motor if you're not careful. Certainly it can spit out some oil from there, and it can mess up your generator or your alternator just by wiggling so much. So on both of my motors, I just never will touch one of those aluminum pulleys again. There's some really expensive ones that have the nice markings like Geenberg or whatever. There's steel pulleys like that look great, but they're like a couple $100 just for a pulley, and I just wasn't willing to pay you know, that extra amount, so I just went with stock black. So there's a video about no more aluminum pulleys as well, but I thought I would drive that one home. All right, number 13. This one was an absolute nightmare to figure out. The correct coil and distributor. So what I found out the hard way is that the coil, which is this blue thing here, you have 3 different types of ohms. You have a 3 ohm, that's like the old-fashioned, like classic 3 ohm coil. All right, so as I mentioned, you have a 3 ohm coil, you have a 1.5 ohm coil, and you have it's like 0.32, I want to say, or whatever. I'm trying to remember exactly what it is. It's like very low ohms, low resistance coil. And that is written on your coil. You'll see it'll either be a 3 ohm, a 1.5 ohm, or 0.32 ohm. So I thought I would be clever and like really make my engine do really well by getting a Flamethrower 3 Petronix distributor with a 0.32 ohm coil, because somehow in my mind I had thought, okay, less resistance when it makes the spark, it's going to be a hotter spark and the engine's going to run better. That is just not true at all. Basically, when you're driving around with a 0.32 coil, what happens is your coil runs out of charge and it starts sputtering, and it's almost as if you don't get any spark. So it took me forever to figure out. I thought like, oh, is my coil, you know, what's wrong with the engine? It was like the intake leak problem. It's like, what is the problem? Well, the problem is unless you know any better, just use a 3 ohm coil. That is my learning, because I conked the car out twice, and I'm like, what the hell's the problem? Is it running out of gas? Is there something wrong with the electrical system? Is it bad? What's wrong with it? And it turns out I just had a 0.32 ohm coil instead of a 3 ohm coil. Once I swapped that all out, and I got the regular old, I actually ditched the Petronix 3 or whatever, and I got a regular old electronic ignition conversion, which I put inside both of my regular distributors that used to have points. They have the little electronic one in there with a 3 ohm coil, and then everything works great. So just remember that if you're just going with stock or just sort of slightly modified stuff. So that is correct coil and distributor. The insidious problem of a low ohm coil is that it'll work for a little while. You'll drive around for 10 minutes and then it starts to sputter. Anyway, that's number 13. Okay, number 14. I almost burned my car out, and I ran out of oil a second time as well, because, and I'll tell you why, because the oil line. So I'm doing a external oil filter. So I'll show you that on both cars. The oil on this one, it goes up here and it goes to an oil cooler, and there's a oil filter there, and you see these braided steel oil lines there that are really well stabilized with those brackets, and they're definitely not going to touch the exhaust. And if you look on the bug, I have, again, full flow, comes down. You see how it's also braided steel? It's not touching the exhaust, although in this case it's a little bit closer than I'd like. It's probably about an inch or a little less. Comes up here. The problem that I want to describe is if you don't use braided steel and you don't measure it right, and you use something like this for your oil line, and then what happens is when this gets really hot, it expands and it droops a little bit. And so what I had happen is I had got the bus got hot, oil line drooped, and it barely touched my exhaust, caused all the oil to explode. And not only did the oil all leak out of the engine, it went on a hot exhaust, which then actually caught on fire. And I was very, very lucky, honestly, because although it was outside the firewall, there was a fire on my bus. And I had a similar thing happen. Well, so I learned that, and I did it with the braided oil lines. So it's this style of line. I think this might be a smaller line, but highly recommend using braided steel and using the AN fittings, and making sure with these little brackets here, they're the little black brackets, that the wires are very firm and don't either wiggle around or expand and touch your exhaust at all if you're doing full flow oil. So that was number 14. Oil lines, be very, very careful. As I said, not only can all your oil run out, it can catch on fire, as I know. Okay, and the number 15, which is the last one for today, is body mounting. So when you're ready, now I use this thing here, and there's a video about this, but I use this with a pulley to raise and lower this body. And there's basically, to mount the body, you have 2 bolts here. So one here behind the rear wheel, one inside there, big one on each side, so that's 4. Then you have the 2 main ones that are right in here that hold the body down, right inside behind this tire. So then you have, it's like 28 or 32 or something like this of these connectors. Let's see if you can see them. Yeah, they run right here and they connect to your heater channel. So there are these, and then you have underneath, you have up front, you have 4 more, which are these big ones here. Those go up into the front of your chassis there, of your, and then in the back, I think that might be it actually. But the point is, when you weld in your heater channels, and it's pretty precise, but it's not exact, you know, you're measuring it out. The relative positions of those holes for where your little bolts are going in, there's a tolerance, you know, maybe of like a centimeter or something. You can have the bolt move to the left or to the right, but I had a problem on probably 10 of my bolts where all the rest of them were fitting great. The front ones, I had to take a Dremel and really widen the hole and use a nice big washer to go up. And I just wanted to say that the more you can do to get the accuracy of your body bolt holes with where you have to bolt them in, like your bottom of your heater channel, or these front bolts here where the body mounts, the better you can align that. And then when you're doing it, if you do it in a clever way, like you can thread the bolts in just like a tiny bit so that they're firmly in there, and then still jiggle the body around by pulling it up on the block and tackle and jiggle it around, put in a few more bolts, jiggle it around, and eventually what you can do is get all the bolts to fit in. What I had to do was lie down upside down and Dremel out like half a centimeter here, half a centimeter there, until I could finally get every single body bolt in, which I did eventually. But my God, what a massive pain in the ass that was. So I just want to say, if you're doing an off-body restoration, it's all about getting the accuracy of the body mount holes in the right place, especially when you're doing heater channels. So that is, those are items 11 through 15. I'll just throw one more in there, which is if you're doing a fuel system and you're putting in a fuel filter, a lot of people say certainly don't put the plastic fuel filter inside of here. And I've had the same experience where it can get very hot inside of the engine compartment. What I actually did is on the bus, I have a fuel filter that is under and behind, and it's a metal one as well, even though it's under there. But this is like a very simple low-end metal one that you could put inside or outside of the engine compartment because it's not going to melt. So but what I did on this one is I got a kind of a higher end racing fuel filter that uses the AN fittings, and I actually put it in here with a mounting bracket, and so it is inside the engine compartment. It is metal, so it's not anything plastic that's going to be able to melt, and it seems to actually work great. And there's less space for the Beetle to have sort of fuel filters in random places, because my entire fuel pump and system regulator and stuff is all here up front. So I could have put the fuel filter way up here, and then it sends the filtered gas all the way back. But what I decided is just on the Bug, it has a big fuel filter inside the engine compartment. On the Bus, it has a metal one. It's a higher end metal one than this, but it is also using the AN fittings, and it's underneath the bus. So it goes fuel tank to solenoid, which is an electrically triggered solenoid, down through to the fuel pump, which then goes through the fuel filter, which then goes into the carbs. Actually, it goes to there's a pressure regulator, and then there's a gauge. You can see the fuel gauge here. That's for the pressure, and then it goes into the carbs with hard lines on the Bus, and the soft AN lines on the Beetle. So anyway, those are the things that I learned for 11 through 15. So I will do the next 5 in the next video. Talk to you soon.